Hi, do you realize that you're just like Joshua? I mean, everyone has been in that situation when we've been given the responsibility to get a job done, but without being the leader. Maybe you're a team member at a staff meeting, or perhaps you're a co-teacher, or maybe it's something just like putting out food at a potluck. Whatever it is, you've been in a situation where you know how to do things. You've done them on your own, but all of a sudden you're in a group and no one is responsible. Well, today we're going to see what happens when in one event you have good leaders, bad leaders, spectators, coaches, and God. It's a story about Joshua. We're continuing on with him, and his next step toward leadership starts when Moses chose him to join 11 other leaders. This caused Joshua to stand up for what he believed when it went against the status quo, how other leaders and even all of the crowd looked at social events and political events very differently from the way he saw them. We're going to start in Numbers 13, and in verses 1 and 2. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am given to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them." So these 12 men were not just leaders in their tribes, they were also physically and spiritually capable of doing great exploits. However, as we look at the 12, only two names, Joshua and Caleb, are still remembered from this event. It was at this time that Joshua went through his name change, Numbers 13:16. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Hoshea meant save, we pray. And it denotes that I really want to be saved. It denotes a desire for salvation. However, the name Joshua, that has a much greater emphasis. And it means the Lord saves. And this includes not just a desire for salvation, but the promise of salvation that the Lord himself will give by his mighty hand. He's coming and he will save his people. So we see that Joshua is being promoted even spiritually here. Well, before the men set out, they get some instructions for their exploration. Now, Moses does not appoint a leader among the leaders, but he did give them some guidelines to accomplish the goal that he wanted. And in Numbers 13:17 through 20, it says, Moses sent them out to spy out the land of Canaan, and then he said, "Go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether they in the cities they inhabit are like camps or like strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are forests or not. Be of good courage and bring some fruit from the land." Moses' commands were broad, but very definite. He said, spy out the land and find out about the people and the cities. And he ended these instructions with, be of good courage. It means don't be afraid. Don't get discouraged. No matter what you see, don't be afraid. And he also said, and bring back some fruit of the land. You see, God had promised a land flowing with milk and honey, and Moses wanted proof of that. Well, Joshua spends 40 days with that team. And although Joshua and the other leaders went all the way to Syria, the emphasis is only on two places, on Hebron and on the valley of Eshcol. In Numbers 13:22a, it says, "And they went through the south and came to Hebron. The descendants of Achan were there." Now, Hebron is a place that we still hear about today. Abraham first made it famous when he bought it as a burial plot for his wife Sarah. And he purchased this, and it's the only part of the promised land that any of the patriarchs possessed because they paid money for it. Everything else God gave them. But this one city, this one place, they purchased. And it served as a pledge to them that God would fulfill his promise. He said, you got this spot on your own, but I'm going to give you the whole land. Now, the 10 leaders who came, they'd all heard God's promise. But they were more impressed by the size of the city and by those giants who inhabited than they were by the relationship to God's promise. This was something that Joshua remembered. He remembers God said that he would give us the land. And he didn't forget that, no matter what others said or how they thought about it. And then in verse 23 it says, "Then they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between the two of them." You know, it's very, very probable that since Joshua and Caleb were the two men that gave a good report when they got back to the land, it's possible that those were the two that cut down the grapes and carried it on their shoulders all the way back to camp. Well, they return to camp. They come back after 40 days to Moses and to all the people. And the 12 leaders returned and see Moses, and first off, he asked for a report. And in verse 27, they told him, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." Can't you just see the 10 of those guys? They're getting ready to give a bad report, but first of all, they point to the fruit that Joshua and Caleb have carried on their shoulders the whole time. You see, they gave the people opportunity to look at that fruit and to stand in awe of how big those grapes were, because they came from Egypt, and in Egypt the grapes were very small. They'd never seen anything like this. And if Joshua's opinion of the other leaders changed from what he observed on the journey because of those words, his expectations took a nosedive when they continued, because that report that they gave, which began with praise of the land, changed to focus on the problems. The very next verse, verse 28, "Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Achan." Oh, what a terrible report. A report that was so bad that it frightened the people. They were thinking, we can't go on. But in verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession of the land, for we are well able to overcome it." Caleb alone is mentioned here. Perhaps it's because he was the first one to speak up, or just as probable, it may have been because he would have been more believable or seemed more impartial than Joshua, who was Moses' assistant. And people could have said, "Oh, you're just saying that because you want to have a brownie point with Moses." No. So we don't know the real reason why Caleb was the first one to speak up, but he did. And he urged the people to attack based on the confidence they had in their army, because they had been defeating other armies. They had just fought with the Amalekites and defeated them. But more than that, he says we can do it based on our faith in God. He knew that the Israelites were well able to do it because of God's help to them. You know, you can try as a leader all you want to do something and to build confidence, but when more people come with a bad report, somehow the voice of one or two gets lost in the crowd, in the mob of more. And here we have an example of that, as it was 2 against 10. And the voices of 10 were so much louder because they continued with their bad report. As the 10 spoke up, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are as men of great statures. There we saw the giants, descendants of Anakim, who came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sights." The 10 were so impressed with the inhabitants of Hebron that they imagined that the entire land of Canaan was filled with those descendants, that every place they went would have giants in it. But they only saw those giants in one place. But their imagination started rolling. You see, they had gone all the way across the land, and in one place they saw giants. But that was so bad. It was so bad that they argued, "Why, we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in theirs." They overlooked the promises and the power of God in order to magnify every danger and difficulty that could possibly come against the people. And their unbelief and their discouragement spread to everyone who was listening. And in Numbers 14:1, it says, "So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night." Why were they weeping? They were weeping mostly because not just of the sin and rebellion of those 10 spies, but they were weeping because of their lost dream. They were weeping because of fear that they had made a mistake in leaving Egypt. And so the next day, there's a second meeting with Moses, with Joshua and Caleb, and the other 10 leaders. The following morning, everyone shows up for the meeting. And in Numbers 14:2-3, it says, "And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said, 'Oh, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?'" The Israelites' complaint to Moses and Aaron wasn't against them. It was really a complaint against God. You see, they said it's God's fault that they were going to die, that their wives and their children were going to die, that they were going to be victims in the land that Moses and God had made them believe that they were able to possess. And so they just resolved to choose another leader and head back to Egypt. It seemed like all was lost till we get to verses 6 and 8. The next ones, it said, "But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they said to the congregation of the children of Israel, 'The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land.'" Oh, Joshua now speaks up with Caleb. He saw everything that the other 10 leaders saw. But Joshua gives his report in context of faith. The 10 leaders took notice of the enemy's strength, while Joshua, the leader that he was, took notice of the enemy's weakness And Joshua reasoned, if the Lord delights in us, he will bring us to this land flowing with milk and honey. He underscored his encouragement with a warning, though. He didn't stop with just saying, we can do it. He said, let's go on. He said, let me tell you what's going to happen if we don't. And in verse 9, he says, only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Joshua said that the people were speaking out in rebellion and in cowardice. He said that Israel was more than able to destroy or break the Canaanites as easily as they could break a piece of bread. He said, it doesn't matter that they're dwelling in walled cities. Absolutely no group of people is safe once the Lord has departed from them. And you need to understand, the Lord is with Israel. Joshua told the people, do not fear, do not rebel. But how many of you like to be told what to do? Neither did the Israelites. And in the last part of verse 10, it says, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. See, it didn't matter that Joshua was a close friend of the one in charge. It did not matter that he was a leader of his charge. It did not matter that he was chosen by God. None of that stopped Joshua from being in danger. And that's something that you've got to understand. Just because you speak up for right, and just because God has called you to do it, it does not mean that you may not be placed in danger. Oh, you might think, well, I better stop then. I'll never say another word. But what's the rest of that verse say? Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. You see, when you get in that place of danger, when you get in that place that you've stood up for righteousness, God shows up on the spot. And it was only the fact that God showed up that prevented Joshua and Caleb, along with Moses and Aaron, from being stoned to death by that angry mob. And you can count on it. When you make your stand, it will be hard. People will turn against you. You may even hear threats. But God will show up on your behalf. And then, more than that, there's other people that are praying for you. Because you see, Moses started to quickly intercede that God would not destroy, not just Joshua and Caleb, but all of the other unbelievers who murmured against him in unbelief. And God listened to Moses. God listened to Moses. And he relented. However, because the Israelites ignored Joshua and Caleb and listened to the other 10 leaders, no one over the age of 20 would ever live to enter the promised land. No one, that is, except Joshua and Caleb, the 2 leaders with a good report. Being a good leader, standing against the status quo, it has its rewards. It's hard, but it is a rewarding job. This is what helped Joshua to live to be the leader that God intended him to be. But becoming that leader took courage. It took courage for Joshua to stand up even before he received that final commendation, that final anointing, that final ordination to become the leader over the nation of Israel. And that's where we're going next time. We're going to see Joshua being chosen by God to be the leader of the people.